In your wickedness, you have broken the ancient commandments and crafted a bond with one of the light.
My father. He was a journalist too. In fact, he was twice the man I could ever hope to be.
Fill your eyes with hatred. Accept your violent fate. Accept it and earn the left eye. Prove you deserve it.
When you love something, never lose it. Understand, little one? You must keep it safe, close to your heart.
Bayonetta is definitely one of those games that has a lot more than what meets the eye. From the religious themes that it holds, to the biblically accurate angels that you fight, and to the concepts of time travel and destiny, all while being insanely stylish and fashionable. Or you can play it for the many scenes of Bayonetta doing whatever this is. The first Bayonetta game is a game that I wish I had played much earlier because this is essentially everything that I could have wanted. As of late, I've found myself playing more and more character action games as they're a lot of fun and they usually don't overstay their welcome. Playing games like the Yakuza series, DMC series, the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, just to name a few. And Bayonetta was always one of the games I would hear about but never actually tried out for myself. And with how much I enjoyed the DMC series, playing Bayonetta was one of the most fun times I ever had. With both series sharing the same director, Hideaki Kamiya, they both have a similar game design with linear levels and combos that flow into each other perfectly. And naturally, with a game from Kamiya, Bayonetta would focus on very stylishly ending your opponents and then getting graded on your performance at the end. The gameplay and cutscenes are also a joy to get through, and you can tell that there was a lot of love crafted within them. And with how absurd the cutscenes can get, everything still feels very natural and in character. Plus the set pieces that can happen during the fights are unreal. And I think the set pieces are best explored in the third John fight, where you're fighting on top of a building which then collapses so you fight on the side of it, which then leads you to fighting on top of a rocket before jumping onto another building to finish the fight there, all while having scenes like this throughout the fight. It's wild and it's energetic, but it honestly perfectly encapsulates the feel and energy of Bayonetta. There's also one entire mission that is just one giant space Harrier reference that Sega just decided they would throw in there. And I'd be surprised if anyone even noticed or knew what Space Harrier was because that game was released all the way back in 1985. And if you do, you're either an old Sega fan or a massive nerd like myself who played a bunch of these older Sega games growing up. And the amount of references that they managed to put into Bayonetta is honestly pretty staggering. And being able to implement all of these references seamlessly and have it work in the world of Bayonetta is honestly pretty impressive. The currency that goes flying out of angels after beating them are rings from Sonic. The face paint that Bayonetta draws on Lucas' face is from Okami. Enzo tells Bayonetta she owes Alex the Kid for charting a plane, which is a reference to their old mascot before Sonic was around. Lucas' design went on to inspire Jetstream Sam's design from Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. The Yellow Moon lollipops cause Bayonetta and John to glow, just like when Sonic characters reach their super form. And the beginning of Chapter 8 starts off with a remix of a song called Splash Wave, which is from another really old Sega classic. It was honestly unreal going through the game and understanding almost every reference that it made, as I've spent a big part of my childhood playing old Sega classics with my brother, and it just made me fall in love with Bayonetta even more. But I'd say the references and throwbacks are just one of the many aspects that makes this game so good. The area where Bayonetta is at its best is most definitely its gameplay. Bayonetta's gameplay is nothing short of good chaotic fun. On the surface, the gameplay may look pretty similar to other action games released around this time, but the mechanics of Bayonetta is definitely a lot more defined than what you might think. And I think one of the more interesting details that makes the combat stand out so much is just how Bayonetta fights. Her entire personality can definitely be reflected with her animations. The way she struts forward when she attacks, how she stands when she shoots, and how she skillfully uses her guns on her feet to attack. As expressive as she is in the cutscenes, I really do think that her personality is best reflected when she's in combat, which is definitely not something you see in action-heavy games like this.
We are the sons of Sparta. Within each of us flows his blood.
While in combat, Bayonetta can do something called a torture attack, which is a really powerful move that damages the enemy. Torture attacks are only available when Bayonetta's magic gauge is near full, and they'll usually give you a button prompt upon approaching the enemy. And they all have special animations for every enemy type that you fight, ranging from repeatedly stepping on your enemies to sending them to horny jail or whatever this is. Torture attacks are basically your get out of jail free card for getting you out of a pinch because they do so much damage. Though in my humble, objective opinion, the chainsaw torture attack definitely has the best animation. I mean, you saw them in half and then get a free angel chainsaw after it. It's pretty cool. As for the angel weapons, they're also pretty cool too. Throughout the game, you'll find angel weapons that you can use against other angels for a short amount of time. One of them being a Hilbert sort of weapon, which she of course uses very interestingly. But it does deal some massive AoE damage. While angel weapons are really good, they actually have pretty short durability, so it's probably better to save them for tougher enemies. And another interesting detail of how Bayonetta fights is just how she uses her guns. While using them traditionally, Bayonetta also straight up attacks with them, which makes for some really interesting looking combos. Like my personal favorite, the breakdance skill that allows her to rapid fire and hit all the enemies around her. It's definitely not the most effective attack, but it's just so stupid that I can't help admire it. The witch time activation is also an integral part of Bayonetta's combat. The ability to slow down time upon perfect dodging an enemy is a game changer, and it's definitely something you'll end up relying on heavily. And it never felt too easy or unfair because of it. I still got pounded by enemies like Grace and Glory about 12 times. But Witch Time won't work on every single enemy, and probably the most challenging are Jean and Gracious and Glorious, which aren't affected by perfect dodging at all. Playing without Witch Time is pretty difficult, but it is an interesting change of pace that allows you to think outside the box during combat. Or you can spam the same punch-punch-kick combo, I mean that works too. But I really do think that the enemy design and art direction do a really good job of bringing these enemies to life. I mean, just look at how detailed the third and second sphere angels look. While I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the boss fights here, there's no denying that every boss looks really cool and memorable. They give me the same uncanny and horrifying feeling as when I saw the angels in Evangelion for the first time. Only this time we have a protagonist who makes the angels look like literal child's play.
Walk off, Featherface!
While I think the bosses are fine for the most part, a lot of them are pretty poorly designed in my opinion. They usually require a set strategy to beat them, which breaks the flow of gameplay that you've become accustomed to. Just about every scenario in Bayonetta can be dealt with differently, and with how much variety you have in terms of your weapons, you can of course go about any encounter however you'd like. I mean, we can't forget that this is the game where you can stroll up to a boss with a lightsaber and roller skates, and it's literally the most busted combo of the game. But the bosses break this loop by having a set path and routine that you just gotta know in order to beat them, and it can get pretty frustrating not knowing what to do. The best boss in this game is easily Jean. Jean is a powerful rival that Bayonetta would have to fight multiple times in different parts of the story. But what makes her stick out the most is the fact that she's extremely similar to you in terms of design and gameplay. She's one of the only human-like characters present in the story who shares the same abilities as Bayonetta. And gameplay-wise, she's probably the toughest enemy that you'll be going up against. Specifically, the second Jean fight is the most notorious for its difficulty. I definitely had over 100 attempts, but I appreciated being the first boss to actually throw up a challenge and not have a set routine to follow. While there was a lack of difficulty for the other bosses, they at least looked really cool. And every boss fight had some sort of cool stuff going on, whether it was the background constantly changing, or just really over-the-top cutscenes of Bayonetta finishing her opponents afterwards. So while there were some bosses that were better than others, they were all pretty enjoyable to get through. I just wish the bosses had the same sort of difficulty and design as Jean, to where there wasn't some sort of gimmick I had to figure out during the fight. One of the bosses literally just has you jumping from platform to platform until you can reach the boss, and then you can actually hit it, and it's one of the most painful experiences ever. I remember I was getting like DMC4 Savior PTSD PTSD, like that's how bad it was. There also just isn't another boss with quick time events like these. I mean, they're so cool but goofy at the same time. The story of Bayonetta is also a pretty interesting one. You play as a witch who has been sealed away for 500 years until she was later found at the bottom of a lake. After trying to remember the events leading up to this, she realizes that she actually can't remember anything at all. And so after coming to terms that she has amnesia, she learns that if she were to get the answers that she's looking for, she would have to seek for a treasure known as the Eyes of the World. There's a lot of information the game kind of throws at you in the beginning, especially in the scene where you're getting a story dump on the origin of witches and sages while you're fighting a horde of angels. As genuinely cool as this scene was, I could not tell what the hell was going on. Throughout her journey, she'll meet multiple people like Jean, who I've mentioned before as Bayonetta's mysterious rival, and Luca, who acts as the comic relief character, but also accuses Bayonetta of killing his father when he was younger. He's also voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, which, like, I swear he's in every single game that I enjoy.
Someone!
There's also Rodan, who acts as Bayonetta's supplier and shop owner of Gates of Hell, where you can buy new moves, weapons, and accessories. He doesn't really add much to the overall plot itself, but they do have a lot of fun with his overly serious attitude, and he does have some great scenes in the beginning of the game. And then there's Enzo, who acts as Bayonetta's underground informant. There's not much going on with his character, but he did apparently appear in one of the Devil May Cry mangas. He was also apparently Dante's informant at one point, which basically proves that DMC and Bayonetta are somewhat connected. And then the last character, Cereza, is a mysterious child who Bayonetta feels a strange connection with. Upon meeting her, she has no family or anyone to take care of her, and for some reason she keeps calling Bayonetta by
Mommy! Mommy, look out! Mommy! Mommy!
and I'd be lying if I wasn't calling Bayonetta the same. Cereza is pretty important for lore reasons that I won't get into, because again, the story of Bayonetta is actually pretty deep. It's deep enough to where they have multiple books that you can get throughout the game that flesh out the world and lore of Bayonetta. While there aren't much people involved in the story other than Bayonetta herself, the character writing and presentation is really good. Luca and Bayonetta's relationship is a good one to start off on. As they start out upon meeting each other, Luca despises her and vows to bring her crimes to light to avenge his father. They run into each other many times during the story, but Bayonetta doesn't ever really take him seriously and jokes around with him in just about every scene. I mean, even the game doesn't really take him seriously. As they start running into each other more, they end up developing more of a bond with each other, and Luca actually gains some respect from Bayonetta. All in all, he's a pretty good comic relief character who does get some good development towards the end of the story. But the real substance and development is really with Jean. She somewhat plays a role in helping Bayonetta get her memories back, and is a second major focus in the story other than Bayonetta herself. As a rival character, she does serve her purpose very well, even though she doesn't necessarily have any reasoning for tracking down Bayonetta. In just about every scene with her, she's always leading you on with vague remarks that point to her knowing something about your past. She's definitely one of the cooler characters of the story, and it's kind of a shame we never got a fully playable version of her outside of that one mission towards the end. But honestly, this works out really well, as the dynamic here is amazing, especially in the last chapter. And you could say that for a lot of Bayonetta, because I mean, the ideas brought into this game managed to set it apart from so many other games releasing this time period. And don't forget that Bayonetta was released in 2009, which was literally one of the most stacked years for gaming. I mean, from how you can play the game to Bayonetta as a character is done in such a unique way. Like how Bayonetta has a button for leg attacks and one for her normal arm attacks. And this probably sounds simple enough, but the way they go about this is the reason why I love the combat system so much. So, Bayonetta basically has different movesets that you can mix and match for her arms and legs individually. This basically just means that her arms and legs act separately. They don't combo into each other unless you enact it. And the weapons that you can use apply to her arms or her legs, and each has a distinct moveset from one another. If you don't want her using the Durga claws on her hands, then you can just give them to her feet and then use a cool katana instead. Or you can, for example, put the claws on both her hands and her feet. The combat just allows for so much variety and experimentation than any other action game that I've seen. Someone like Dante from the DMC series just has one button for melee attacks, so I felt like the learning curve was a lot slower and more difficult when it came to understanding the mechanics. Doing the extremely cool moves that you would see in the style videos would take a lot longer to learn due to the fact that the mechanics are just so limited at the start. You would really have to get used to and understand the nuances of gameplay to be able to do something like this. While Bayonetta somewhat requires this, it's not to such a great extent because from the start you're already open to so much more than the usual action game. You start off doing your basic combos, but it really doesn't take take long to start feeling competent because you can just tie your moves into your arm and leg attacks and do some really good damage. And it definitely helps with how flexible you can be in the air as well. I feel like Metal Gear Rising Revengeance wanted to mimic this kind of style, as Raiden also has a punch and kick integrated into his moveset, but it fell somewhat flat as it lacked the combo variety and stylish flow that Bayonetta had. The combos felt a little automatic and floaty, whereas Bayonetta's was very manual and in control. Not to say that Revengeance gameplay was bad by any means, it just felt a little different than what I'm used to. But to further define Bayonetta's combat, they also had something called the Wicked Weave attack. This is essentially a giant demon limb that she can summon at the end of a combo string, which serves as a final hit to end it off. Not only does the Wicked Weave look cool, but the longer the combo is, the more damage you'll deal at the end. For normal enemies, it'll also stun them, allowing you to start up another combo right after. It's pretty amazing for crowd control and also incentivizes you to create longer combos to maximize the amount of damage that you can do. And all of this is complemented by the design and presentation of Bayonetta. The Bayonetta series has never really been one of the most popular out of the character action genre, but everyone has at least seen or heard of Bayonetta at some point. And I mean, she was popular enough to end up in Smash Bros. And simultaneously become one of the most frustratingly broken characters of Smash 4.
There's just no way! Wait, are you gonna get no hits? Oh my god! Oh my god! Perfect!
Round and bang, bang. We're going to see if Booty can get finished his plate. He's going to try. There's a DI on point. It's not where it needs to be, and Dangus Joe's stock is gone.
Call out with the ABK, and that might be it. That is it.
Yeah, by the time Ultimate came out, she was turned all the way down. But going into the character a little more, Bayonetta was honestly a great surprise for the time. She's very cocky and confident, but not to an overbearing extent. When faced with danger, she brushes it aside and taunts her enemies, but also isn't afraid to actually show emotions when things start to kick in. And she always acts in this sort of alluring manner, but it's never really used as cheap fan service. Sometimes. I mean, from how she acts, she just kind of treats it as a way of life and just as a part of her personality. I mean, even something as small as her slow walk animation just says it all. She walks like a model on a catwalk at all times and moves in the most elegant way possible. Plus the breakdance move that she can do literally ends off with a pose and then a camera shot. It's as if she has a spotlight on her at every given moment. It kind of feels as if they not only wanted to create a memorable protagonist, but also a literal fashion model. Which I guess is somewhat true, as they did get a model to dress up as Bayonetta for advertisement purposes. Though it's not just Bayonetta, I'd say just about every character in this game gives off a unique sense of style and personality. Jeanne gives off more of an elegant vibe with her red and white colors and the puffy collar around her neck, and someone like Enzo was clearly influenced by the Italian mafia by how he dresses and even how he speaks. It's great to see that everyone has something unique to them, and it's really cool that style had such a huge priority in the franchise. It sucks because as good as Bayonetta was, it actually was one of the more obscure games of the genre, unfortunately. And with how creative and detailed the combat system was, I'm actually really surprised that the series never took off into mainstream popularity. Though I guess it's finally up there with the release of Bayonetta 3. It was so incredibly satisfying to finally finish a chapter or a boss fight and then just get the most outlandish, crazy cutscene ever.
There is another one to be seen.
And all of this combined with Sega references that just gave me so much nostalgia growing up, combined with an upbeat jazz soundtrack, just has to make this one of the most memorable games for me. It even remixed the iconic Fly Me to the Moon and then used it as one of its main themes, which is just insane to me. I think this goes to show that no matter how many times you remix Fly Me to the Moon, you genuinely cannot mess up. From the success of Bayonetta, Platinum Games went on to make even more games that a lot of people consider to be all-time classics. They went on to make this one little game that's pretty underground. I mean, I don't know if you ever heard of it, but you should definitely give it a try. But yeah, Bayonetta is basically a masterpiece, and I'm actually gonna go binge the rest of the series now because I haven't done that yet. I just hope that those games have more scenes and cutscenes of this.
If you get in my way, I will... How do the Americans put it? Oh yes, bust a cap in your ass. So real, will this discover me again?